Good morning. Hope everyone's doing well. A little rainy, but we're all here. It's good. I'm happy to be back. I'm happy to be part of this great Disciple Masterpiece series. I feel very blessed to be honored to be able to speak to you guys again. And today's topic I'm going to speak about is how does God speak to us, really? How does God speak to us? And that's going to be a fun topic for me. It's kind of a cornerstone, I believe, of just knowing God is this topic. And just to kind of level set a little housekeeping is that we've been doing every week questions from Hector to George to Randall before we kind of jump in where people can share. Last week we had questions around suffering. And normally we give time to be able to share that today about what you guys have to say. We're going to pocket that because we have a little special prayer time at the end that we need a little more time for. So we're going to take those questions and we're going to do them next week. So keep them in your mind. We're not forgetting about them, but we're going to do the questions around suffering and the sharing time next week, okay? So with that, once again, as I prepared for this, I went to all the favorite sources, the Bible, the home church, and the many people here. It's very important, I think, for you guys to know where all this comes from. All my experience in just different churches and conferences, some of my favorite authors, A.W. Tozer. And I asked, since we're talking about how God speaks to us, I asked about half a dozen different saints from all around the nation to tell me how God speaks to them. And I'm going to share some of those stories later in so we can all be edified and learn from that. And then also a great book called Rooted, which really helps you walk through and understand how to really know and experience and have the principles of a Christian and God. And I think it's fantastic. I'm going to start with a story. So I want to imagine that there's an individual who's walking through the park one day and he sees a book on the ground. He goes over, he picks it up, looks around, no one's around. He ends up going home and opening the book and reading it, and ends up being someone's journal. And as they read it, they just all of a sudden start to feel connected to this individual. Similar stories, the journey, the ups, the downs, the lessons learned, the wisdom in it. And the person just starts to get connected and finds out that the person who this journal belonged to is a famous person. And they're starting to get to know this person, and then they realize it's a famous person, and so they actually find other people in fan groups who loves this person, and he joins the fan group, and they go ahead and start learning about them and sharing information and being able to be, hey, there's a community now around this great things that this person has done as a celebrity, and it's fantastic. And then one day, this person gets the opportunity to go to a party where this person will be. They're super excited. They open the door, the person's on the other side of the room, and they walk right on over the person, they hold out their hand, and shake the hand, and the person obliges, and they just start gushing for 2 or 3 minutes about all the amazing things this person's done and how much they love them and great and all this stuff. And then when they get a breath, the person who's the celebrity asks them this question, do I know you? They know a lot about them, but they don't know them. Sometimes I feel like when our walk, we at times in the church have sometimes the ability to do that. We read the Bible, we know all the stories, we know the principles, we're connected in regards to we could pass the test if it was multiple choice, but do we know him? Knowing someone is bidirectional, give and take. And as we continue this journey about being masterpieces and being shaped and being molded, as Hector and everyone has spoken about, we want to make sure that we know him because that is really how we get refined. So as I build upon how God speaks to us, I first want to go through and just do a little summary of the great stuff Hector, George, and Randy have done, just to make sure we level set from the past weeks as it's going to fold in and connect in with this week. So first off, we are all being discipled to be like our teacher, who is Jesus Christ. We were created for good works that the Lord has prepared for us ahead of time. That's important because that speaks to a vision, that speaks to a destiny, that speaks to something that he wants you to walk into. And I would like to submit, at least in my own sense, I didn't come out ready for that, but I've been molding towards that and knowing Jesus. We're created to be the light that is seen so all can see him and give him glory. This is all about his glory. And we, I believe, as people, as humans, are best happy and fulfilled when we give him glory. And we're designed for that. And then God has called us to make disciples, baptizing and teaching them. We aren't just designed to sit in a corner by ourselves. We're designed to be able to share and be able to bless the world and help each other as a community to be more like Christ. As we continually say yes to God, our teacher we will become like our teacher. So that's why we try to model Jesus. Jesus lives in such a surrender that the only things he does is what his Father does and hears. Oh, to live in that kind of heart, to be that attuned with what the Lord has. Aspirational for me. Some of you might have figured out, but aspirational for me. The works Jesus does are by his Father's authority. He only does what the Father does. Our authority and supernatural actions come from Jesus and the Holy Spirit alone, not by our own power or might. Not by our own power and might. We have been commissioned and equipped by God to stand against the schemes of the devil. We fight against the rulers, authorities, cosmic powers, and spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places. There is a spiritual world. There's a physical world, obviously. But we are meant to partake in both. And the topic we'll be covering in this discipleship whole thing today is all about that, taking part in both. We must equip ourselves with God's armor. George did a great talk on that. This is really the connection and ability to be able to live in the spiritual and the physical world. Praying at all times in the Spirit with all prayer and supplication, to always be connected to the Father and always in communication. And we need to get to the point where we don't judge God by our circumstances, but we judge our circumstances by who we know God to be and who he has said he is. Randy did a great talk on suffering. Just so you guys know, if you had to teach on it, suffering's a hard topic to teach on. There's a lot of pitfalls you can rock into, but he threaded that needle perfectly, I thought. If you haven't watched it, go back and listen to it. It's fantastic. I listened to it twice. He just did a fantastic job, and I thank you for that. So Jesus said, this is John 5:19, Jesus said, "Truly, truly, I say to you, the Son can do nothing of his own accord, but only what he sees the Father doing. For whatever the Father does, the Son does likewise." If that's true, I would say, so we better get good at communicating with him. Where are you? I want you to pause. Where are you in your journey? Where are you in that? And that's the topic that we're going to now transition to and take on the rest of the day. So I want you to kind of have an image. I think there's a beautiful image of the kind of position of our heart and mind when we go into these topics. And I think it comes from John 1:32, and this is when Jesus is getting baptized by John the Baptist. And John testified, saying, "I have seen the Spirit descending as a dove out of heaven, and it remained upon him." Now, it uses an image. You know, some people say it was a physical dove. Some say it was the Holy Spirit in the form of a dove. Not important. For this kind of image, as we position our heart and how we should be, I want you to imagine here that this is the dove. And it remained on Jesus. And if I put this on my shoulder, and I had a dove on my shoulder, how do you think I'm going to walk with each step? I would walk with a dove in mind. If I went running around, the dove might fly away. Now, I'm not talking about her salvation in any regard. I'm speaking about hosting the presence, moving in the things of God. If I was going to walk, I would walk with each step in mind of the dove. I would stay connected to the dove. So use that as an image as we go through these things about how we should model, how our hearts should be positioned in this topic. So when I talk about how does God speak to us, really, if I could break it down, is how does God communicate to us? Because really, speech is just one form of communication. And we're going to dive into this in a little more detail, but I just want to level set that we're talking about many different ways of communication. One prayer that I have for all of us here, and for me, this comes from A.W. Tozer, the book, The Pursuit of God. And my prayer for me is, Lord, teach me to listen. The times are noisy and my ears are weary with the ruckus sounds which continuously assault them. Let me hear thee speaking in my heart. Let me get used to the sound of your voice, that its tone may be familiar when the sounds of the earth die away, and the only sound will be the music of your speaking voice. Prayer. What is prayer? I think this is a great summary by Philip Yancey. When I pray, it may seem that I'm narrowing my world, retreating from the real world into a prayer closet in Jesus' metaphor. Actually, I am entering another world, just as real but invisible, a world that has power to change both me and the world I seem to retreating from. You ever have sometimes that mental disconnect where you have like, hey, this is my life, the prayer life, and this is like real life, and sometimes I think we got to merge those. And there are seasons in my life where they've been very separate. I have a list of what I'm going to pray for, and I pray for it, and I don't really even, either I'm not consistent or I don't measure what the real impact is of the world. There can be a disconnect for me. And I think blending this is really the sweet area. So let's talk a little bit about how we, as people, how we hear, how we communicate. First off, there's auditory, speech, music, screaming. I mean, you can go on and on, right? You can talk about the visual, body language, pictures, images. Sometimes a picture is worth 1,000 words. We have written words, books, poems, contracts, notes. We can go on and on. Touch, hugs, holding hands, intimate connection, different ways in which we engage with people and communicate. And smell, perfume, food, pheromones. Some animals can tell to eat something or not by its smell. Is it poisonous? Is it spoiled? Medicine, they can seek out. I just read an article recently where cows will go out if they're sick. They'll go out and they'll find local flowers that act as medicine, and they'll use their nose to find them, and they'll eat them, and they themselves will get made well by eating the medicine. So this is not an all-encompassing. I actually looked up this topic, and you could read volumes of stuff about all the ways to communicate. But I want to just keep this in mind a little bit, because the key thing that I find in my experience when I read all the things in the Bible is that God uses all of our senses and created things at all times to speak to us. I can't just narrow it down. He's speaking to us all the time in different ways. And I want to now dive into these and what I've been able to see in the Bible, in my experience. First, I would say nature. God speaks to us through nature. And I'm going to break these out a little bit later, but I just want to give you the full list because it's quite extensive. Audible voice, the Bible, hear him in your mind, strong impression, a just knowing, pictures and images in your mind, miraculous acts of God, parting the Red Sea, pillar of fire, healings, being whisked up to heaven. Never had that one happen to me. Wouldn't mind it. Everyone seems to be scared when they get there, so I imagine that'd be the same for me. It's a commonality. Angelic encounters, too many to talk about. Handwriting on the walls, amazing stories hard to put into a category. Dreams, seeing God. I can go on and on. Tongues, many different ways God communicates to us. I mean, there's too much to cover. There's so many ways. God is using everything to reach out to us as a people. He's using everything to be able to call his people to him. So I would like to dive down into about 8 different ones in more detail. I'd like to share some stories that people have shared with me, some Bible stories, so we can all kind of be edified and to start to get a glimpse in our mind about how this works, what this might look like, so we can then, as disciples, start to model and be open to these things. Nature. Scripture, Psalm 19, 1 through 4. The heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the work of his hands. Day after day they pour forth speech. Night at night they reveal knowledge. They have no speech. They use no words. No sound is heard from them. Yet their voice goes out into all the earth. Their words to the ends of the world. Romans 1, 20. For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that people are without excuse. The very nature of this world is something that only a timeless, all-powerful being can create. And I just say that nature itself is a testament to God. The things in nature itself praise him and speak to his actual existence and his goodness. Audible voice. Context here, there's many times that God spoke audible in where you could physically hear the audible voice of God. Not in your mind, I'm speaking about the physical voice of God in the Bible. But the one I want to call on today is the context of where Jesus comes in. This is right after Palm Sunday when Jesus entered Jerusalem for the Passover festival. This is before he's about to be crucified. And some people have been hearing all about the miracles he's been doing, and Lazarus raised from the dead. And so they wanted to see Jesus. So they go to the disciples and tell the disciples, hey, we want to see Jesus. And so they go to Jesus and tell him that they want to see him. And Jesus replies, the hour has come for the Son of Man to be glorified. Jesus says, now my soul is troubled. And what shall I say, Father? Save me from this hour. No, it was for this very reason I came to this hour. Father, glorify your name. Then a voice came from heaven. I have glorified it, and I will glorify it again. The crowd that was there and heard it said it had thundered. Others said an angel had spoken to him. Jesus said, this voice was for your benefit, not mine. 2 things I'll take away from that. One is, God can speak audibly to us. Second thing is, if you don't have the mind to understand the things of God, you might want to try to interpret it in the natural. It was thunder. The grid would not allow them to conceive that there was a God up there speaking, so they had to interpret this boisterous sound, and their natural minds interpreted it as thunder. I'm going to tell you a story about hearing through the Bible. Now, there's many ways you can hear through the Bible. There's great things we take from the Bible, but I'm going to speak about one specific one. Actually, this was my father. If you don't know, my father's a minister, and he actually went ahead and he was invited to go to Iraq. My actual brother ended up going with him, who's in the audience today. Saw many great footage when they came back, but this was right after Saddam Hussein fell. And then the country had just opened up, America had gotten there, and they were inviting pastors to come in there and teach the hidden church in Iraq to be able to minister. So when this took place, one of the mission pastors came up to my dad and said, I believe you're supposed to go to Iraq with me. And so he said, okay, well, I'll pray about it. And so he went ahead and he asked the Lord, Lord, should I go? And he didn't hear anything. There was no audible voice. There was no thought in the head. But he thought, hey, I'm gonna read my Bible, as he normally does. So he took his Bible out, and he opened it up to his bookmark, and the first passage that came was Samuel 23, 1 through 2. When David was told, look, the Philistines are fighting against Keilah and are looting the threshing floors, he inquired of the Lord, saying, shall I go and attack these Philistines? My dad then closed his book, and he felt a leap in his spirit. And he said, oh, Lord, I feel like you're speaking to me here. He opened it up again, and the next passage said, the Lord answered him, go, attack the Philistines and save Keilah. He closed it again, and he's thinking, oh, man, I'm going to be going to a war-torn place where I could easily be killed, and I know my wife's not going to like this. What do I do with this? And I want to take my older son, and now there's two people on the line, potentially, if things go wrong. And what do I do with this? And so he then opened back up the Bible, and he read this. But David's men said to him, here in Judah we are afraid. How much more then if we go to Keilah and against the Philistines' forces? He said, wow, man, you're just reading my mail right now, God. You're just speaking to me word by word. You're hearing my fear. You know what's going on. He closes again. He asked, should I go? Should I go? And the next verse says, once again, David inquired of the Lord, and the Lord answered him, go down to Keilah, for I am going to give the Philistines unto your hands. He submitted this to my mother, and my mother prayerfully considered it, and as a family, they made the decision to go. And it was a great story. Luke has great footage we can share one day. One of my favorite footages of a donkey drinking a soda can. I don't know, as a kid, that stuck out at me. But there's other great ministry stuff to do that. I find this story very interesting about the Bible. Once again, it doesn't have to be this exact. It's funny also my dad's name is David. So it kind of is funny in the regards that it's very much speaking to him in this case. And just happened to be right where his Bible mark was already turned to. But it can happen in different ways. It can be words might hop out at you on the page when you hear from the Bible. It could be maybe the message communicates a value that you feel you should apply. There's different ways that the Bible can speak to you, but I just thought that this was a great one to be able to share with us today. Just knowing, a gal from church who I absolutely love, church I attended many years ago, she had this story where she was at a red light, foot on the brake, and she had this all of a sudden pop in her, deep into her soul, don't move. And she just sat there, and she's like, and then the light turned green. And she sat there, 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000, light's green. And then, bam, a car runs right through the red light and would have T-boned her exactly where she was. God sometimes just puts a message deep into us that we just know something. My wife is very good at this. And when we first started, when we were married and we're starting to make decisions together more and more, this was a difficult one for me because I sometimes have the knowing, but not very often. She has it all the time. So I had to learn to trust her just knowing in her life, in our life. And now it's a great value for us today as we make decisions because sometimes we'll be like, hey, we need to pray this topic. And the Lord will just give her a just knowing. And I trust that it's as true as the sun. It comes up every day. And I'm not saying she's perfect, but man, that thing has been tried and true. So that actually is a great, great welcome to me, the just knowing. You can see pictures. You can hear words in your mind. You get impressions. I have a story where all three of these took place. You don't have to just do, God does not speak just in one way at one time. And so this is kind of a little bit of a unique story to where this was right when I got done with college and I was as a young adult and getting your career job and I'm just meeting with so many great other young adults and we're just chasing after God. We're wanting to hear him, see him, and I'm asking, Lord, help me learn to hear. Help me, give me more opportunities. I want to constantly abide in this hearing and this knowing and being connected. And so we're at a big church gathering one day and across the room I get drawn visually to this one gal and immediately I hear the word breastplate. And so that draws my attention right to a breastplate. Not a place you usually want to be looking when you're at church as a young man. But I was saying, Lord, is this you? And then all of a sudden I hear, and I saw a heart of gold. And then I had a very strong impression that I am supposed to go share this with her, that she has a heart of gold, and that the Lord was drawing me first to her breastplate and to share that she has a heart of gold. And so I said, Lord, again, I've been asking to hear from God so I can participate. So I go up to her, hey, I'm still trying to learn from the voice of God, and, I believe I have something for you the Lord wants me to share. And I share with her that the Lord drew me to your breastplate, and then he took me inside of your chest cavity to where I could see your heart, and he wants you to know you have a heart of gold, and he loves you. And the gal just burst up in a big smile, and she was very overjoyed, and she shared with me that even though she's like 32, a few months earlier, she had open heart surgery, and they cracked her breastplate, and they had to fix her heart so she could live. And she's been insecure about that, and she's been asking the Lord about her heart. Will it last? Will it survive? I had no idea. I was overjoyed to be used. It was exciting. You never know what you're going to get. You never know what it's going to mean to that person. The one thing I also call it here is he gave me an image and some words, but he didn't give me the interpretation for it. He didn't tell me that she recently had heart surgery. I just had to share what I was heard, and the Lord used that because he knew the circumstances it'd be shared in. Sometimes we get the interpretation, and that's great, but we don't always get that. And I just have to be faithful to do what he's called us to do. Angelic encounters. There was an odd experience I had once, and this was in high school when I was once again just chasing after God, and I had a mentor. And this was obviously, this is kind of before the internet was really a thing, so you don't really stream things. And so what we do is we get together, and we go, and they had this, pretty big TV in the corner, and we put in a VHS. You guys might have seen those in some of the history books, some of the younger folks. And this is how you did it. You would go to church. You'd usually pay your $5 for a sermon if you liked it. And you'd take your VH home, and you'd have a stack of sermons and conferences. And if you remember those, you have to rewind them, all those great things that no one else has to deal with today. And this gal, when she's, so we just put on this, sermon, and she just spends the first 20, 30 minutes of her sermon just soaking and praying and just on her knees on the stage, just seeking God, bringing God's presence there. And during this time, she then starts to ask us to interact. Hey, close your eyes. Pray with me in this way. Let's just be silent. And I'm sitting there, and I have to admit, I'm struggling. I'm not there. This conference was in the past, years old. It's not in the location where it took place. And my initial thought was I should not partake in the interacting because this was for those people that were there at the time. But I just thought, you know what? I don't know. I'm just going to go with it. So when she got on her knees and said, get on her knees, I got on my knees. When she said, raise your hands, I raised my hands. When she said, repeat after me, I repeat after me. And there's this time where she said, let's just stay silent. And we're silent. And we're just waiting. And then I hear and feel in my left ear like a dove wing fluttering. And then I open my eyes, and 5 seconds later she says, did you hear the angel's wings? That's an odd experience for me. I've never had something like that happen again. I'm not saying that'll happen, but there is a spiritual realm. And as we spoke about the last time I spoke, we're talking about your heart and your mind equals how you see and engage the kingdom of God. That was a way God communicated to me that he is real and tangible, and there is a spiritual world that I am taking part in, whether I know it or not. And that grid that you see the world is how we go forward. That grid is being refined as disciples through following Jesus, knowing Jesus, modeling Jesus. That is what we're talking about this entire series that we're on. And that is how we become the masterpiece and disciple that we're meant to be. Now, I would like to jump into two rules and some tips that I have come to learn on walking through some of these things. And I'll share some stories along the way. So the 2 rules, these are, I think, believe that I would submit to you guys hard rules that we should always follow. First off, God's communication never contradicts the Bible. Never. You will not have God contradicting himself. Now, the communication might enlighten, It might help you better understand the Bible, but it will not contradict it. Second, test all things. No one gets it right all the time. I don't get it right. Hector doesn't get it right. George doesn't get it right. Randy doesn't get it right. The elders don't get it right. Your favorite TV preacher doesn't get it right. Your favorite author doesn't get it right. No one gets it right. No one alone has the red phone to God that everything has to go through that person. In fact, it's best for us when we pray, and specifically about big decisions, we should all, since we're all tapping into the same Holy Ghost, have a commonality in what he's saying. We should take those things prayerfully consider. So if someone comes and says, I know exactly what the Lord's saying and you have to do what I have to say, that's a red flag for me. And I just submit to you today that that might be something that we should think about and make sure that no one is a sole source of communicating what God says and does. Some tips, we're going to go into more detail. How to ask God for a specific question. Ask for and use wisdom in the things God shares. Why does God not speak? It's a fun topic. And practice on the small things. So let's dive into these. First off, if you're asking a specific question, perhaps should I take this job? Should I move here? Should I go to school? Someone's dying. God, should I go visit them? I don't know. Whatever the specific question is, what I like to do, if possible, you can't always do this, is I like to have the clear question and it to be a yes or no answer. I find for me, it's easier to hear a yes or no. Sometimes when people ask me to pray for them, they'll have questions like, hey, what can I pray for you? And they'll say, well, I have this question from God. First off, I have this new job thing here, and I'm wondering about that. And then there's this girl here. And when I talked to that about that, then there was this thing that happened. And then, when I talked about I need prayer, Billy said that he would pray for me, but I don't know if he did. And so you pray for me. And I'm like, what am I praying for? I don't know what I'm praying for. And so then I'm like, okay, Lord can still give me something for you. But if you're asking me to pray with you and 2 or 3 other people, and we're all trying to get the same thing, you got to have a good, clear question. Now, not all questions can be yes or no questions, but if you can, word it as yes or no, because it's easier to hear the Lord say yes or no than to give you a paragraph, in my opinion. Okay? All right. Prepare your heart. Remind yourself he is good and wants the best for your family. If you're praying for a big topic and you know that this could have big implications for your family, it's important to know that the God always has your good in mind. If you come from a place where he is not for you mentally in your heart, it's going to be hard to hear whatever he has to say. So prepare yourself. For me, this is worship. Getting quiet. Maybe it's going for a run. I don't know. But prepare yourself. Ensure your heart can hear either answer. That's a tough one. Can you get to the point where you're so surrendered in preparing yourself that if he says yes or no, you know you're with him and you're happy with the decision? That is a tough one. A lot of emotions in there on that one. But if you can prepare yourself in that way, it takes away. If you've ever asked big questions, you'll find there's a lot of emotion behind them. And even when you think you hear, you just have this nagging maybe doubt that just can't get you to say God answered it. So I like to try to just, if you can, get yourself emotionally to a state where you're okay with either answer. Whatever you hear, ensure it does not contradict the Bible. I have to say it again, very important one. It is okay to ask the same question multiple times and request others to pray with you. I love doing this one. I think multiple people praying for you. I oftentimes will ask 3 or 4 people to pray if I have a big decision. And I'll ask some of them, just pray for me and see what God tells you. And I'll ask a couple of them to say, this is the specific question I'm asking. Like I'll send it to them in text message. This is the exact words I'm asking for a yes or no question. And then I ask, and I get the data back, usually over a week. And I say, does it align with what I'm saying? And yeah, it aligns. Hey, this is great. 2 or 3 people agreed. My answer seems to align. I feel very confident in that one. Just something to consider. If married, always do this for your spouse. You're one flesh. You make decisions together. They will impact you all. There's 2 reasons why you should do this. One is, if you're all going to be doing something that's very big, you want the journey to get to the agreement you're going to do it together. There's nothing worse than someone coming in and said, honey, we're doing this. I'm not saying that can't happen, but we want to make sure that it's done together. You want to take your spouse, whether either gender, you want to take your spouse with you. If you get a clear answer from God, trust him and walk out what you hear, even with partial understanding. I don't get all the answers. I usually get a step, maybe 2. And then I'm on the journey. And then I'm like, now what, God? You usually don't get the full blueprint. At least I don't. If you do, I need your number. We'll connect after. I have some questions. Give yourself grace as you mature and practice this. This is a journey. The image I shared last time I was up here, if you're a kid trying to learn to walk and you stumble and fall, the father's not going to be, or the mother's not going to be angry at you for stumbling. You need to pick back up and try again. That's the heart behind this. And always anticipate God, but don't demand to hear from him all the time. We should always be anticipating him to move and answer. But if he doesn't, hey, sometimes it doesn't happen. And if he's silent, live by the principles of God. Those are timeless. He's already spoken those. He doesn't need to re-speak them. Be good. Be fair. Don't steal, right? I mean, there's so many we could talk about. Abide in him. So many things we could talk about. The next area is ask for and use wisdom in the things God shares. I'm going to tell you a story of a pastor. A pastor had a church, and he was invited to go to another church to be able to help out with the pastors and the ministry and to minister to the church leadership. And so he gets there in the group of people, and they decide to do worship, and they're seeking the Lord together. And the pastor who was visiting got this image of the associate pastor stabbing the lead pastor in the back. A very divisive, violent image. Now, he decided with wisdom to ask, this is a big picture I'm getting, what should I do with it? And so he asked, Lord, how should I handle this? What should I do with this? And in that asking, the Lord gave him an answer about what he should do. And so he took the associate pastor and the lead pastor and put them back to back. And he went to the associate pastor's side and said, the Lord is saying that you are to guard this man's back. You are supposed to back him up and protect him from people. And that associate pastor broke down crying. He confessed what he'd been doing to supplant the lead pastor's efforts in the church. And there was reconciliation. The broken church was made whole. Key things I want you to take away from this. Just because you get an image or a word, it doesn't necessarily mean you should share it. Sometimes he gives you something for you to understand, either to be said at a later time, or to ask him, now that I understand, what do you want me to do? You hear from God, step one. What you do when you hear from God, step two. As we mature, we could practice those together. Okay, why does God not speak? Great topic. Randy kind of hit on some of it a little later. I'll have to repeat what he said. But first off, I'd just like to say, willful disobedience. It happens. Sometimes you just feel like you know what the Lord's either calling you to do or what you shouldn't be doing, and yet you just, and you separate yourself from what the Lord is trying to communicate to you. Now, let me just pause here. There's a lot of reasons why you may not hear from God. So I don't want people to grab onto this one and say, hey, this is why I'm not hearing from God, and have a mentality that they're just always disobedient. Sometimes there is a certain kind of mentality that we will take things on ourselves which don't belong. Okay? He is giving us free will to choose. I love my daughter, but I don't want to have to tell her every day what to do. Go to the cupboard, get the cup, fill it up, drink it, wash it. I want to teach her that these are just right things to do, and she can do it. We want to become mature adults in the Lord. You don't want to have to everything. He wants you to just be free. He didn't create robots. It'd be a lot easier if he did, but he didn't. He wants us to develop the skills of living by his principles. If you're asking, should I go rob the bank? I think we can, there we go. God's speaking softly to draw you closer. Sometimes he is speaking, but sometimes there's so much noise in our lives, in our hearts, that we're not hearing him. And so if I'm over here and I'm yelling, come over here, but if I'm just whispering, come over here, I have to come from that side closer. Sometimes he's drawing us closer with the silence. He's teaching us to persevere. Very important. for maturity. And he already gave us the answer, and we need to hold it in faith. There's a story here. Another pastor, he had a friend who got cancer. Very bad cancer, one you would not expect to live from. And he was praying for his friend and interceding with the Lord, like, God, what is going on? What should I do? And God told him, go buy a very expensive bottle of wine. Whatever you think expensive is, he said it was 3 or 4 times that amount. And then he said, you're supposed to share with your friend with cancer that when he's healed, you will drink this together. That was at the beginning after his diagnosis, and it went months to a year of chemo, of the process of getting the cancer out of the body to become healed. And then there came the day when he got the clean bill of health. And during that time, he was asking, God, are you with me? God, are you there? And then he would go back and remember that the God told him that he will drink that bottle of wine when he has a clean bill of health. Sometimes the word has already been given. If we re-ask the same question, he may not speak on it again because he's already given you the answer. So, in celebration mode, the guy with the bottle took a taxi to his friend's house. They celebrated, and he took a taxi home. And they had the whole bottle. They celebrated. 1 year of hell, the end of it. It is not the right time. Sometimes we're not ready. Sometimes the word is not ready for the world or whatever the circumstances. Sometimes it's not always the right time for us to have an answer to a specific question. It is the wrong question or not meant to be answered. The why is a lot of times, Randy hit on this very well. We don't get a lot of times the why did this happen sometimes. But sometimes the question might just be the wrong question. You might have to refine what you're really asking, Lord. And you might not even have a clear idea of what you're asking. And last one, I have no idea. Sometimes we just don't know why God's not answering. We got to be honest with that. We have no idea sometimes. So these are common things when people are starting to hear and learn how we hear from the Lord, the topics that come up, and I just wanted to make sure that we kind of think through that and just know that there are good reasons sometimes. And also there's many reasons why it could be happening, but the whole point in this topic, if you're not hearing God speak, is to keep pursuing him. Read the Bible, worship him, keep asking. He wants to continually have an engagement. Just because he's not answering, in fact, it's never because he's disappointed with you. You might be disobedient and he still wants you to come back like the prodigal son. It's not that he's angry at you, but remember, if you hold your heart that he has the best in mind for you and your family, just keep in mind that if he's not answering something, think about maybe how you could do it different or that he's not angry. Sometimes there were times, particularly in very stressful situations, where I wanted an answer and I didn't get it, and I became bitter. Randy hit on that very well. What suffering not dealt with can lead to. Go back and listen to the sermon. He does a very good job of that. There's seasons where things were too painful, so I numbed out. I don't know what your numbing out is. Could be something wholesome, could be something non-wholesome. Some people work out when they need to numb out, and they take it to the nth degree to avoid their problems. Even good things can be used inappropriately at times. One of the other key things that I've learned is practice on small things. If the Lord was going to tell you that you should jump off the roof and you're going to fly, you better be dang sure that you're hearing the voice of God. When he tells you to go to Egypt and tell Pharaoh, let all the people go, you better be dang sure that you're hearing the voice of God. And for me, this is just me, I was starting to try to hear the voice of God. I thought, you know what, I don't know if this will work, but I'm going to jump out in faith. Lord, I'm driving to the shopping mall. Tell me where I should park. A lot of times I heard nothing. Sometimes I did. But the small things, if I got that wrong, it wasn't like I went to a Pharaoh and demanded him to give away all of his people. The stakes were a lot less high. And so I think it helps people as they're practicing, if this is an area of concern or nervousness, to think through that. I think is very important, to be able to practice on small things. Maybe you can even, as practice, think of someone in the church and be like, I want to pray for them, so I'm going to pray for them for their week. And I'm just going to, if the Lord gives me something, share what I think he's saying. I think that'd be a great thing for us to develop as a church. Wouldn't it be cool if we all practiced to hear for each other? And then all of a sudden you come on Sunday morning and someone hands you a little written note. I feel the Lord is saying this to you. I'm submitting it. I don't really know. Let me know if it resonates. What a great, great model we could build and we could become better at. That's a culture. Does that sound like a fun culture? Yeah. Why not do it? We now are going to go to a special time. We've been asking questions every week, and we've been having people come up and share them. But this particular topic that we spoke about today is how to hear the voice of God, or how he speaks to us. So I thought, let's ask him the questions and see what he says about us. So I'd like to invite the worship leaders, and I like to invite the volunteers. We've created 7 teams of 2, people who the church knows and who have the skills and have developed to be able to hear the voice of God. And they're going to be in 2s. And we'll have 5 up front and a couple on the side. And what we want is we're going to ask these questions. This doesn't come up for prayer time. I have this problem or that problem. These are the questions that we're going to ask the Lord together as you and the 2 volunteers, how God sees you and what does he want to share. The key thing I want us to develop as well is that when we go to God to talk, it doesn't always have to be because we have an immediate emergency need. We're supposed to live in community. When I speak with my wife, we'll speak about many different things because we have community and we communicate with each other. And so this is the time for you as we're going to have a little quieter worship. This is the time where I want you guys to take part in the worship, prepare yourselves, and then come up to one of these people. And they're going to be worshiping if you don't show up, but you should come up and they're going to go ahead and pray for you and help you ask these questions. And we're going to keep it to about a minute or less. And we're just going to let God speak to us and help answer the question that I think we all need to hear often. I think this is a great question that we could regularly ask because it does something when he answers in our hearts and our minds. For those that are remote, I would ask that you pray over each other if you're in a room with others. You practice this together. The Lord's with you. If you are alone, ask God directly, or you can just partake in the worship and enjoy the soaking time. And so once again, I encourage you all to come up. We're just going to go into a time of extended worship and prayer time. We've built extra time in just for this. Thank you.